Good morning and welcome everyone to our information session on the LIFE 2020 call for proposals for NGOs on the European Green Deal. First of all, my best wishes to you all for the new year. May 2021 be a good year for climate, environment, NGOs and larger civil society. My name is Anne Bollen, I work for NEMO and I will be your moderator this morning. I'm delighted to see that we already have over 200 participants joining from NGOs, associations, foundations, networks, and this from all EU member states, which is great. Our webinar this morning will last nearly 3 hours and we have 6 excellent speakers lined up for you. The first 3 presentations will give you an overview on recent developments of climate and environment policy framework under the Green Deal, presented by DG Environment and DG Klima, as well as a presentation on this particular call under the LIFE program by EASMA. We will have a short 10-minute question and answer session for generic questions on the policy context. After this, there will be 3 speakers from EASMA who will go into the details of the actual call for proposals. During these presentations, please ask for more detailed questions that you may have. And then we will let you digest all the information during a coffee break and come back for a much longer, almost 1-hour question and answer session. And then finally, Mr. Salsi from EASMA will conclude the information session. So some technical issues, even if this is yet another virtual event in this new year, we would like to make it as interactive as possible. So I encourage you all to open Slido in a separate window on your computer or on your smartphone. And please put the acronym NGO4GD behind the hashtag that will appear. And then you can type your questions. Tell us who your question is addressed to. Feel free to add your name. And don't forget to be concise. You only have 160 characters. And then everyone can also vote on the questions that will appear on Slido so that we will address them in the order of the most votes. Just for clarity, we will not be taking into consideration any questions in the team chat, so all should go through Slido. We are also recording this morning's session, which will be made available afterwards on the LIFE website, as well as the LIFE YouTube channel. And for those of you who registered, you will find a link, so you and your colleagues can revert back to it afterward for information. So, let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to present our first speaker, Mr. Jean-Claude Merciol, who is the head of the LIFE unit at DG Environment, and he will be talking to us about recent developments on environment policy framework related to the Green Deal. Mr. Merciol, over to you.
Thanks, Anne, and good morning to all of you. First of all, I would like to wish you, your colleague and your family all the best for this year. As you know, unfortunately, we are living in a very challenging situation and we have all been facing a number of new difficulties last year. Let's hope that in 2021, so this year, it will be, I would say, for all of us, the years of, I would say, easy solution and with, I would say, less use of the word virtual. As you know, since the end of 2019, with the European Green Deal, climate and environment have been included among the main priorities of the European Union, European Commission, with the ambition of the European Union to deal by example. The Green Deal is a new growth strategy that aims to transform the EU into a fair and prosperous society with a modern, sustainable and competitive economy that leaves no one behind, and where there are no net emission of greenhouse gases by 2050, and where economic growth is decoupled from resource use. At almost the same time of the Green Deal communication, the COVID crisis started, and it resulted in limitation of our action, of our tools, and of our resources. As we know, including through direct regular contact with NGOs, the economic crisis caused by COVID pandemic has made civil society as a whole and non-governmental organizations in particular, suffering from a strong reduction of the capacity to act, of the capacity to contribute to the main changes needed to achieve a successful and just transition toward a sustainable future. As indicated in the call of proposal that you have seen, we have on the one hand, I would say, strong and ambitious challenges, and on the other hand, we have NGOs that are expected to contribute to it, but are facing difficulties to develop or even sometimes to maintain their activities. I'm very happy to be here to this event today, and we have already seen the number of I would say person connected, and this may increase, and of course you can as we said, you can see I would say the session later on as well. Here we are here in fact to react, and for this we have not only clear, motivated and ambitious objective, but we are all together. And for this reason, in the framework of the LIFE program, we have launched this present call for proposal in order to help reinforcing the capacity of NGOs to mobilize and strengthen civil society participation and contribution to the European Green Deal. This will be a win-win situation, as we strongly count on you, on your support for the implementation of the Green Deal in the member state. And LIFE is a great tool for that, be it the present or the future program. The LIFE program proposal was adopted by the Commission in June 2018, before the Green Deal. However, it fits perfectly with the Green Deal for two reasons. On the one hand, LIFE works with all the actors of the society and has developed specific, I would say, relation with NGOs. And for instance, for years now, the LIFE program supports NGOs through operating grant. This will continue in the same condition under the new program, which will be adopted soon. And on the other hand, the objectives of the LIFE program will contribute 100% to the Green Deal. The objective of the future program will represent an evolution, not a revolution, of the current one. There will be the shift toward a sustainable, circular, energy efficient, renewable energy based, climate neutral and resilient economy, the protection, the restoration and improvement of the quality of environment, including air, water and soil, and to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and to tackle with the degradation of ecosystems. So the present call is the last one of the present program. It represents, in fact, a transition between the two programs and anticipates already the contribution of the new LIFE program to the Green Deal. More concretely, with this call, we count on the NGOs to contribute to the Green Deal objectives, which have been further developed in detailed strategies and plans, such as the biodiversity strategy, the farm to fork strategy, the chemical strategy, and the new circular economic action plan, just to mention some of them. The biodiversity strategy is based on 4 pillars. Pillar one first is the nature protection with the increase of protected area. The objective is to protect 30% of EU land and sea, and a third of this area should be under, say, strictly protected condition. So this will involve areas of very high biodiversity value and areas important for mitigation and adaptation to climate change, and including old primary and old growth forest. Pillar 2 is the nature restoration, with legally binding targets to be proposed this year, such as no deterioration of any protected habitat and species, and in addition, to ensure the trend to be positive for at least 30% of the ones which are not in such a situation for the moment. It includes as well organic farming above 25% by 2030, biodiverse landscape feature above 10%, reduction of pollution from fertilizer by 50% and by 20% of the use, and planting 3 billion of additional trees. Pillar 3 of the strategy is a transformative change, enabling, say, including governance framework, business engagement, and knowledge education and unlocking finance. And we have as well the last pillar, which is the ambition for a global agenda, which is in line with the EU vision. And the ambition should be that by 2050, all of the world ecosystems are restored, resilient, and adequately protected. A few words on the Farm to Fork strategy, which aims at a reduction of 50% of the use of more hazardous pesticides, and by 50% by 2030, and a reduction of nutrient losses by at least 50%. The Commission strategies aims at better, say, protecting citizens and the environment, to boost innovation for safe and sustainable chemicals, with especially simplification and consolidation of EU legal frameworks. And the new circular economy action plan contains concrete measures such as, say, to make sustainable products the norm in the EU, empower consumer and public buyers, focus on sectors that use most resources and where the potential for circularity is high, ensure less waste. And I will stop it and here, and I will give now the floor to Philip Owen, who will be complemented by presenting the objectives relating to climate action. And in all these areas, there is, of course, as you can imagine, much to do, and we count on you to implement actions at national and regional level. Of course, you are not all what you can do to mobilize the civil society to promote the need for behavioral changes and ensure that the new expected investment will be done in full respect for environmental constraints will be, of course, great. So thanks a lot, and Philippe, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jean-Claude. Good morning, colleagues, good morning, friends across the European Union. My name is Philip Owen. I'm a head of unit in DG Climate Action in the European Commission, and I'm responsible for other things apart from life, but life is clearly something which is very dear to our heart because it really helps us implement our key policies on climate and on the environment. Let me also wish everybody a happy new year. I will not take up an awful lot of your time this morning, but I will try and keep what is important in view, because we are coming together at an important but also difficult time. This call for proposals, as Jean-Claude said, is the final one under the current LIFE programme. There is a new one in the making. It has been finalised before Christmas and will probably be adopted in March or April of this year. But this call for proposals is also additional to what we normally do, because normally we focus on our traditional projects, our traditional grants, but also we have operating grants for NGOs. But here we are doing something very specific for NGOs at member state level, really to try and make a difference on the ground in the member states. If we look to the sort of themes which are covered by the programme, it's very clear what we should be working on. The documentation calls for tangible results in strengthening knowledge and empowering civil society in one of several themes. And I'm specifically interested in the themes related to increasing climate ambition, but also clean, affordable and secure energy. And finally, the other one which really interests me is, of course, sustainable finance. So I'm being a bit sort of selective out of the many issues which Jean-Claude mentioned can be actually covered by the European Green Deal. So in reality, I'm looking for projects run by NGOs at a member state level, which focus on strengthening either the citizens' knowledge or our knowledge here in Brussels, the policymakers' knowledge relating to a number of things. It could also empower civil society in the same areas. And as I said, I'm specifically interested in increasing our climate ambition, energy efficiency, and that's especially in buildings. And the third theme is very much sustainable finance. You may ask, why am I going on about these? Well, climate ambition, in my view, goes hand in hand with energy efficiency. And of course, in terms of our policies, over a year ago now, in December 2019, the European Council, which is the heads of state and government, adopted a principle of climate neutrality by 2050 in the European Union. And this has been enshrined in law. We proposed a climate law with this back in March of last year. And that climate law is currently being finalised between the co-legislators. And I hope certainly by March of this year, it will have entered into force. And in many ways, it's inspired others. South Africa, Korea, Japan have all come up with climate neutrality goals, and China has also come up with a carbon neutrality goal. So again, this has a spillover effect from outside, and what we're doing here can influence other people. This is why the NGO community has a clear role to play. The other side, of course, is our increased ambition for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the at least minus 55 target was agreed in December 2020. And again, by the middle of this year, we will be proposing new legislation. And this again is an area where NGOs can certainly be active in influencing people, but also in actually bringing forward ideas for us. So the areas of legislation are the emissions trading system, where we're thinking of including aviation and maritime emissions, and also possibly buildings and road transport. We will also update our effort sharing regulation, which covers the sectors outside the emissions trading system in the member states. We will come forward with new legislation for land use and forestry, and also there'll be revised energy efficiency and renewable energy legislation coming out of our colleagues from DG Energy. And specifically here, coming back to buildings and energy efficiency, we already have the renovation wave, which was launched a couple of months ago by DG Energy around energy efficiency in buildings. On top of this, we want to look at CO2 performance standards for cars and vans. And finally, something else, sort of flanking measures, touching also a little bit on the international side. There'll be a proposal for a broader carbon adjustment mechanism to make sure that there is a level playing field between what we're doing in Europe and third countries, and also a revisiting of the Energy Taxation Directive. But whilst this is legislation, it's also about influencing people and changing people's behaviour. And I'm thinking very much of the renovation of buildings here. We have to encourage people to renovate their homes. We have to make sure that they're using state-of-the-art windows, non-toxic insulation, and new technology like heat pumps. And also different ways of using our land. Planting trees is the obvious thing, but we need to also think about our food chains and how those can be sustainable, but how even, dare I say, we move away from, we change our diets over the next 30 years, so our land is more adapted for those foods. And also thinking about the way we move around. Electrification of our transport systems, but also how we can encourage walking and cycling, and also touching on evolving holiday patterns. Clearly, I talked about the 55% reduction, but it's not only that. We also have a new adaptation strategy, which will be launched in the coming weeks, because climate is affecting Europe. We see droughts, we see coastal erosion, we see forest fires. It is here, it's already having impacts on us. So there'll be a new adaptation strategy. There's already information published about this on the internet. So we want to improve our knowledge of climate impacts. This is one thing we'll be looking to, but also we want to reinforce our planning for climate risk management, both in the public and in the private sector. And thirdly, we want to really look at solutions. We want to deploy innovation of what we can do, and also make sure that we implement things properly, and also move on to prevention. So again, adaptation is a key area. The other area of work is our Climate Pact. This was launched in December, and there'll be further work coming forward this month. The Climate Pact is really trying to involve all levels of society in climate action. It's an EU-wide initiative inviting people, communities and organisations to participate in climate action, to build a greener Europe, but also to build greener European institutions. And through this, we really want to involve people, communities and organisations in connecting and sharing knowledge, in learning about climate change, and also how to develop, implement and scale up solutions to adapt to and mitigate from climate change. So again, another area which I think is also quite relevant for the NGO community. Finally, I just want to say a few words about sustainable finance. This has been quite a hot topic in recent years, and it's far-reaching, and it is very relevant to citizens, because we need to start people thinking about how their pensions and their savings are invested. Are these pensions and savings being made in assets which have a long lifetime, which are green, which are sustainable, or are they not? Are they being invested in oil companies rather than renewable energy operations? So people need to start thinking about this a little bit more. Also, we need to start thinking about whether people should get a better deal on their home loan if the home is very energy efficient. Is this something else we should be taking into account? And a third area which perhaps is of interest, and this is climate risk again and adaptation. Should people be able to insure against climate risks and extreme weather events? Because often we see today either the premiums are totally exaggerated or even impossible to find. So again, should there be legislation in this area? And so this is again where we both need knowledge, but also people's views. So in reality, I know that proposals will have to be made before the end of March, and many of these things I'm talking about now are still very much in the making. But certainly I think people need to look to see what's gone in recent months and recent weeks, because I think this is really relevant for the next decade as to what can be done. And so whilst this may not be finalised, I think a good project will certainly be bearing some of these aspects in mind when it is made. We very much look forward to seeing many applications. It's good to know there's so many people on the call today, and also we look forward to hopefully getting this money committed as quickly as possible, and the results of our projects coming back as soon as possible to inform us in Brussels. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. But now I will hand you over to Angelo Solsi. Angelo, many of you may already know because he is the real pillar of the LIFE programme. He's worked with the LIFE for many, many years, more than I would care to mention in such a public place. But certainly he has a vast knowledge and experience, and more importantly, an overwhelming enthusiasm for the programme. So I look forward to hearing myself what he has to tell us today. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Philip. That was really a great introduction. Now let's see if I live up to the expectations. I think there is no better way to start a new difficult year than to show that one of the pillars of the EU, meaning solidarity, is very much alive and kicking. This particular call shows that indeed Brussels might be somewhat far away from the citizens, but at the end of the day, we have ears and brains that allow us to capture what is the real difficulty on the ground, and to show that we are able indeed to materialize this concept of solidarity. This call was not foreseen in any of our regulation or legal basis. We had no obligation to do it. It was, and I must pay tribute, largely stimulated, if you want, by the Green 10 here in Brussels, who did an incredible lobbying work, and at the end of the day, we listened and it materialized. So let's see whether we can make the best out of this very little contribution, which starts from the assumption, rightly so, I believe, that the non-profit organization that represents a big share of our civil society, they are indeed an essential part of our mechanics and the way we govern our society. The second element we had to indeed consider is that the COVID crisis has a number of different impacts. Some on health, obviously, the most obvious. Others are more, let's say, financial or economic. And we have concentrated at the very beginning our attention to the crisis that hit the sectors that were the first one to shut. But then we had to rapidly consider that there is a very big share of our economy, let's put it in those terms, and even labor market, which is made up by the third sector or the non-profit sector. And this might have suffered from the COVID financial crisis just as much as the others, if not even more. Indeed, many of these organizations are rather fragile. They depend totally in terms of production, if you want, under work class, so under staff. And to be able to have staff on duty, you have to pay them some sort of salary, possibly a decent salary, but at least something that they can make a living out of that. And in the moment, you cannot anymore easily raise money because you cannot go on the ground and carry out your activities, stimulate the interest of your members, or even in some cases, your elder members who are not even able to go to the post office and pay their membership fees. Clearly, you start having cash flows problems, and this leads rapidly to a possible crisis within certain NGOs that leads to the dismissal, partial or even total, of some of the staff, and this then has in turn a big blow on the ability of that particular NGO to deliver what we are interested into. And this is the third element which comes into the game, which Jean-Claude and Philip explained very well, the Green Deal. So we start from the assumption that most of you, being active in the field of environment, climate change, and energy, you are indeed providers of support to the Green Deal, because the Green Deal actually covers all these aspects. And so we said we can mix the two elements. So our wish to help you in this COVID crisis, financially speaking, and the other one was our aim to get the Green Deal up higher on the agenda. And if you mix these two elements together, it's very easy to conceive your project proposal. So you don't have to invent necessarily new actions compared to what your normal work program would be. You only have to rethink your work program in order to be able to indeed package it and build it in a way that indeed is Green Deal driven and is Green Deal driver at the same time. We also invented a simple mechanics, so we don't want to make it an overburdening work both for you and for us, and that's why for the first time at large scale we're going to apply what we call the lump sum approach. So if you succeed in getting a grant under this particular call, we will not ask you a financial statement or a financial report. You will not have to prove to us that every single euro that you spend has an invoice behind it and all these kind of elements. So think about it, because it's probably even more interesting than the money itself. It will be a challenge for us. It will be a challenge for you because it's an experiment. But I'm confident that together we will make it. We will certainly make it happen. The last thing I can leave you with is that we will get into the details of the call later on. But I have already received several inputs from some NGOs that said, but it's only one call, it's only now. What happens if next year the blow of COVID continues and indeed the loss materializes at a later stage? Indeed, we consider these elements, but we had to sort of find a balance between our ability in monetary terms, so the quantity of money that we had available in the budget, and in administrative terms, we had to find a balance in order to be able to deliver something without expecting that this is indeed the perfect solution. If indeed the situation will continue or even worsen as compared to today, we will take stock again of the situation and see whether we can do anything more. But for the moment, it's a one slot, it's a one opportunity. And normally, we hope that the crisis sort of comes back and that it will be a one-off solution. Otherwise, we'll sit down and talk about it again. I cannot promise you anything more than that. And now I return the floor to Anne, who is our master of ceremony, and we have a short question and answer, if I reckon correctly. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our presenters. I think this nicely sets the scene for this particular call for proposals. There's been some questions that have come in. If you have some others related to the policy context, don't hesitate to keep posting them. So I kindly ask all presenters to activate their video and microphone so we can get started. We have first two questions, which I will revert to Mr. Salsi, who are linked to income loss. So the first one says, why is this call linked to both the Green Deal and the loss of income? It doesn't make sense for NGOs that are primarily financed to projects. And a second one is, what if the NGO complies to all requirements except the loss of income in 2020 compared to 2019? Angelo?
Yes, the first question, I perfectly understand the first part. I'm a bit unease with the second part of the question. Why is this call linked to both the Green Deal and the loss of the income? I just explained it, so I don't think I have to come back on that one. It makes no sense for the NGOs that are primarily financed through projects. This I don't get it. But maybe the person who has tabled the question can later on clarify this one. If an NGO complies with all the requirements except the loss of income, unfortunately, this NGO will not be eligible. That's the unfortunate, easy reply.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps the link to projects for the NGO is referring to if you have several long-term projects and that's not reflected in your budget of 2020, I guess they cannot comply with the criteria.
Perhaps.
Okay, perhaps. Okay, well, let's move on. A second question is from Roland from EOPSA. He says it's for Mr. Owen. He says EOPSA is working on reduced emissions in ports through shoreside electrification. Would this fall under this live call in terms of priorities? Mr. Owen?
I think certainly improving the energy efficiency side here is something which could be very interesting. However, I've just also looked at your website, and I think you need to really check quite carefully whether you are an NGO and whether you will be eligible in the first place for this, because from what I see is perhaps that you are an association of several industrial players. But the concept of shoreside electrification, absolutely, because I think it is a good thing. So if there were a project around that which qualified, I think I'd certainly be open to it. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Merciol. Will LIFE continue this support for national NGOs?
Yes, definitely. The answer is yes. Of course, we will continue the support. As I said, we have it now. We have discussed with the Council and the Parliament, and it was very clear for them as well that this support will continue. So we will have clear provision in the new LIFE regulation. So we will do it. And again, just to clarify, it has been mentioned, but just to clarify again, this support, I would say, to NGO is a standard support to NGO we have with a regular call we launch every 2 years, which is, I would say, different to this present call, which is in addition due to the specific situation. But of course, NGO are main actors and we'll continue with them.
Okay, thank you. Another question, how about green entrepreneurship? Are training entrepreneurship related programs for youth allowed in the framework of the call? Any takers for this question? Angelo?
I'm a bit lost. I mean, it's. I guess that yes, this is one of the many potential actions that could be fit into the Green Deal logic. The only thing is that the green entrepreneurship has to be indeed framed into one of the many either targets or objectives of the Green Deal, and then it's just a mean to get to an end. So training them, yes, why not?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another one for you. Must it be a national NGO or can it be an EU-wide operating NGO that's based in one of the EU member states?
Yeah, it can be an EU-wide operating NGO. The reference to national/regional for large countries is to set a minimum threshold. So you should be at least a national one, or in large countries, at least a regional one. But indeed, if you are operating in several countries or even in the whole EU, you are more than welcome.
Okay. I think we have a comment that refers to our first question. NGOs that are financed via long-term projects did not lose their income and cannot apply. It does not make sense. Is this support for COVID or for Green Deal?
It's for both. It started off by an initiative of the NGOs that raised the profile of the financial crisis induced by the COVID crisis on NGOs. And at the same time, we wanted to use it as a vehicle to further support and to really show that getting out of the COVID crisis doesn't mean losing track of our Green Deal strategies and priorities. So we mixed up the two in order to indeed first give you support if you are in a situation of loss. If you are not, then probably for the moment at least you don't need this particular support. And the second one is giving you the support, but upon conditions that indeed you aim and you target this in your activities this Green Deal approach. So in that from our perspective under this umbrella, it does indeed make sense. We could have invented a scheme that was only a financial support if you were in a difficult financial situation. That was the early stage of our discussion. Then we upgraded it with this Green Deal element, so it becomes I think a nice packaging. It will not, unfortunately, address or will not be accessible to all the NGOs, but I think that for the moment, if you don't experience cash flow problems, I would be more on the happy side than on the worried side, and you should look at some of your colleagues that maybe are already experiencing instead serious cash flow problems.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Mr. Merciol, I believe you mentioned it, but just for clarity, will there be this year a classical life NGO operating grant call in addition to this specific call?
As I said, in fact, here we have a very specific call due to the COVID situation. And now we are, for the moment, finalizing the negotiation of the regulation, and we will discuss and agree with the member state on the multi-annual work program, on the basis of which we will launch again all the standard of calls that we will have. So we will come later when we have, of course, the agreement on this. But again, this is totally different. The two exercises are totally different.
Okay, thank you. Angelo, a question related to the Brexit. Could you clarify the situation with regard to UK-based NGOs? Are they considered a member state in this context?
Well, they're not considered a member state, but they are allowed to participate because this is, as Philip said, is the last call under the 2020 budget. And to this budget, indeed, UK contributed, and therefore we explicitly mentioned in the application guidelines that UK-based non-profit organization, they can indeed apply for this specific call.
Okay. Mr. Owen, a question for you. Do you believe that a festival that aims to foster environmental awareness about climate change fits this call?
You know, I think insofar that this is about involving citizens and raising their awareness, it makes sense. But I think we need to know an awful lot more about what the real aim of this project was about. You know, how is it going to actually influence people in their climate ambition? How is it going to do anything for energy efficiency, especially in buildings, etc., etc. So, you know, having a festival as part of the project sort of makes sense to me. But I think we need to know a little bit more about it and also have some more, you know, concrete outputs than that would certainly make it into a good project rather than simply an application for a project.
Indeed, that makes sense. A next question, again for Angelo. The call has a very high revenue threshold, 700,000 euros, so only large NGOs can apply, excluding most of the small and medium ones. They need to be sustained as well.
Well, Stefano is absolutely right. The only reply I can give is that first, there is an element that we call subsidiarity. So we do from Brussels what is best done from Brussels, and we don't try to replicate or overlap with what should be done at member states or regional level. You should be aware that in many parts of Europe, I just mentioned you a couple of examples, in Italy, Lombardia, in Spain, Catalonia, and in other places, there has been already intervention, financial interventions from either foundations or public authorities, like in Catalonia, to support the third sector. So we are addressing, if you want, that kind of level in the non-profit organization, which is not the EU-wide level, which we are already addressing through the operating grants, or it's not necessarily that one. And it's not the very local one that we hope will be, to a certain extent, supported by regional or national authorities, and we are taking the one in between. That we are indeed. We think that it's also a shared sort of shared responsibility. On the other side, I will not hide you that there is also a very technical or administrative type of hurdle. If we would have taken away completely these thresholds and leave the field completely open.
I believe we lost you there. Angelo, are you still with us?
I'm still with you. I'm in.
Yes.
Hello?
Can you just repeat your last sentence?
Yeah, I just mentioned the fact that we have a hurdle, an administrative hurdle, that is the manageability of the workload that this call could generate. And I refer to one single example, a region in northern Italy where a foundation published a call without limits, and they received more than 1,000 applications. So in one region, you have to think we are covering the whole EU. We would never be able to manage thousands and thousands of applications for a 12 million call. So we have to find the right balance between our ability to deliver, the interest that we have in the whole machinery of civil society, what is the right place where we should aim with an effective impact, and also not generate unnecessarily expectation, because with 12 millions we will be able to finance 30, 40 NGOs. That's it. So why getting 10,000 applications if that is the success rate?
Okay, thank you. A question for Mr. Messiol. As an NGO focused on lung health and provide advocacy and education around the need for the reduction in air pollution to support lung health, is this relevant?
In fact, we would have to see exactly, I would say, the activities of the relevant NGO, in the sense that, of course, all this is linked with air pollution, so it's linked with our activities. But of course, at the same time, we are here, say, mainly focusing on environment and climate. So we have to ensure that we focus on the NGO which are delivering clearly on this activity. So it would have to be seen exactly with the real detailed activity of the NGO.
Okay, thank you. And then a final question again to Angelo. We are recognized as a social enterprise, small and medium enterprise called Space for Good, based in the Netherlands. Are we eligible for the call?
I suspect not, because most likely you are profit oriented, but you are invited to prove me wrong.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations and responses to this session. And don't worry, participants, if your question hasn't come up yet, we have a much longer question and answer sessions after the coffee break, so we will have time then. So for our next set of presentations, I would like to invite Joël Noirfalis, Project Advisor at EASME, who will give us an overview of the features and eligibility criteria under this call, while also explaining how to submit your application and go over the different forms. Joël, over to you.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Anne, for giving me the floor. Jean-Claude Martial, Philippe Owen, Angelo Salsi provided us with a policy background to this special call for proposal, as well as a highlight of the priorities that we're expecting proposals that we will be receiving to cover. I will dive deeper into the nitty-gritty of the call for proposal itself and will highlight its special features, as well as take you through the criteria that have to be met for an organization to be considered eligible. We will then take a closer look at the evaluation process itself. The evaluation criteria that will be presented to you should really serve as a lens through which you can auto-evaluate your own proposal, as they will be the criteria that we will be using ourselves to assess the project proposals that we will be receiving. In the second part of my presentation, we will focus on the technical part of the application form, and you will receive some tips to prepare a good proposal. It's a fairly long program ahead of us, so we will swiftly start. If I manage to actually scroll down, which doesn't seem to be the case. Just 1 second. Is this working? Yes. This call for proposal has a number of special features, which we understand that many of you are already familiar with from the questions that we heard earlier on. First and foremost, we're expecting proposals to be submitted by one single organization. The grants that will be attributed are mono-beneficiary grants, so partnerships are not eligible, and nor are affiliated entities. Affiliated entities are entities which have a legal or capital link with the applicant. We're looking at financing projects that will aim at delivering tangible and quantifiable results that engage civil society in an inclusive implementation of the European Green Deal. We already received extensive examples of what this could be through the presentations that presented, but I really want to highlight the fact that we are looking for tangible, qualifiable, and quantifiable results in the proposals that we will receive. Action must be implemented in EU member state territory. This is not a development cooperation program. We're really looking at supporting actions that will be implemented within the territory of the European Union. Project duration cannot exceed 24 months. And as was already mentioned by Angelo, the grants that will be financed through this call will be based on a prefixed lump sum amount and will not be based on reimbursement of actual cost. By introducing this novelty of lump sum, we're hoping to bring simplification and reduce the administrative burden on the side of the beneficiaries, and basically shift the focus from financial management and the checking of costs to the actual delivering of results and impact. The overall lump sum that can be applied for cannot exceed 300,000 euros, and it cannot be more than 60% of the total estimated eligible costs of the project. You will receive further details on this rather exciting novelty in a presentation that will be given by my financial colleagues later on. And on a maybe slightly less exciting note, we will now turn to the actual eligibility criteria that are spelled out in the call guidelines. As you will have noted from the call guidelines, the eligibility criteria are quite specific, and we really urge you to ensure that your organization does meet them all before you actually apply. The first criteria establishes that organization must be non-making profit legal person, and the second one, that they must be independent, in particular from government, other public authorities, or from political or commercial interests. The organizations that we're looking for must be primarily active in the areas of environment and or climate change. And we will be looking at the statutes of the organizations that have submitted proposal in order to determine whether they are actually primarily active in one of these fields. The organizations must be legally registered in one of the EU member states. And as this was already said before, UK organizations are eligible to apply as we're using 2020 budget for this call for proposal. The legal registration must be before the 1st of January 2018. There are a number of other criterias. Criteria 6 really relates to the geographical scope of the organization, as we ask for the organization to demonstrate that it operates at a national level. And in member states that are considered to be larger, this requirement can be met if the organization demonstrates that it operates at least at a regional level. And these countries that are considered larger for the purpose of this call for proposal are Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Poland, and the UK. And this differentiation is based on the total population size of these countries. Criteria number 7 relates more to the revenue, so it's more of a financial criteria. In that total revenue in 2019 must at least be equal to 700,000 euros, and or this criteria can also be satisfied by an average number of permanent staff of at least 10 persons. So it's more in terms of the size of the organization that this criteria has been established, and we already had a few questions on this aspect. We are aiming to support organizations that have suffered a blow to their revenues as a result of the COVID crisis. So the 8th criteria relates to the financial aspect and the fact that the organization has to have recorded a 10% negative trend in revenue in 2020 in comparison to the average of the 2 previous years, or have recorded a revenue loss of at least 100,000 euros. Last but not least, an applicant that is a current recipient of a LIFE NGO operating grant is not eligible to apply under this call for proposal. And the same is inversely true. An applicant that is successful under this call for proposal, so that receives an action grant under this call for proposal, will not be eligible to apply under the NGO operating grant that is due to be published in spring 2021. So it's important to be aware of this restriction. To assess the eligibility of the organizations that will be submitting a proposal, as well as to perform further financial and technical viability check if a proposal is recommended for funding, a number of supporting documents are asked of the applicant. They should be submitted along with your application form. They're listed here. I mean, do take a careful look at it. If your proposal misses one of them, it will not be kicked out immediately of the process. You will be contacted and asked to submit it. But obviously, this will slow down the evaluation process. So we strongly invite you to take a close look at these list of supporting documents and to ensure that they are included in your application form. When it comes to audited financial statements, you will note that if audited accounts are not required by law, or in the case your 2020 accounts are still provisional, we will accept self-declaration certifying the validity of these accounts, provided that they're signed by a legal representative. And there is a model provided for that in the application pack. So I will just repeat, we will not kick out a proposal if one of these documents are missing, but we would really appreciate it if when applying, you ensure that you actually include them in your proposal, as this will allow us to smoothly proceed with the evaluation process. which brings me to the evaluation process itself. EASME, so the Executive Agency for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, is responsible for the entire evaluation process. We do call on external experts, but that's merely for support on a specific expertise. Each and every proposal is reviewed in its own right. The principles of equal treatment, transparency, proportionality, and non-discriminations are applied throughout the process. And the first check is of a rather administrative nature. So we will look if the deadline has actually been respected, if the official application forms have been used and in the correct format, if indeed one applicant has submitted only one proposal. Here again, I underline that we will only take into consideration one proposal per applicant. And if your organization submits more than one proposal, it will be the last one submitted that will actually be evaluated. Proposals that actually make it through this administrative hurdle are checked for eligibility. We've just gone through the eligibility criteria. As I've said, in case of doubt or in case of a missing document, you will be contacted and you will be given a limited time period to provide us with the necessary document or information. Proposals that are considered eligible are then evaluated against 3 award criteria that we will present in the next slide in more detail. But before going into that more detailed explanation on the award criteria, it's important for you to know that a panel bringing the different experts together actually discusses the proposals and makes a recommendation to an evaluation committee that is composed of representatives from both the Executive Agency for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise and from our Policy Director Generals. It is that evaluation committee that actually decides on the final scores to be awarded to each proposals, as well as on a ranking list of these proposals. And if 2 proposals achieve the same scores, there is precedence that will be given to the one that has achieved a higher score on award criteria 1. And then if there is still 2 proposals achieving the same score, precedence will be given to the one with the highest estimated value for money. We do not have national allocation under this goal, but we will seek to ensure geographical balance when establishing the list of proposals recommended for funding by allocating at least the best passing proposal per member state. Obviously, if a member state has no passing proposal, then this will not apply. So if a member state has submitted a proposal, but that proposal has failed, it will not be taken into consideration in the list of recommended proposals for funding. The technical and financial reliability of the applicant organization that actually make it to the list of recommended proposals are then verified before contract preparation starts, before revision and contract preparation starts. We are expecting to sign approximately 40 to 45 grant agreements with civil society organizations. So the next slide is a slide that presents you with the 3 award criteria. Proposals that successfully pass the eligibility are evaluated by independent experts against these 3 award criteria. And to pass, a proposal must score at least the minimum passing score for each criteria, as well as reach at least 55 points in total. The first criteria relates to the technical coherence and quality of your proposal. You will note that it has a high weight of points, 45 out of 100. and it also has a minimum threshold at 25. And this criteria really looks at the clarity, feasibility, and sustainability of the actions proposed. When assessing your proposal against this criteria, what we will be looking for in terms of question is whether the pre-operational context of your proposed action is well described, if there is a clear logical link between threats, problems, objectives, the work packages that are described in the proposal and the actions proposed, as well as the expected results. We will assess if the work packages and the actions proposed are appropriate to actually achieve the defined objectives. Do they clearly state how, when, where, why, by whom they will be undertaken? Are they feasible, and do they directly contribute to the achievement of the project objectives? Are they properly quantified? Are the means and expertise foreseen adequate? Finally, is there a clear and credible description of the strategy and action foreseen to ensure sustainability? Criteria number 2 has a total allocation of 30 points, and in order to pass it, we require a minimum threshold of 15 points. And it will really look at the proposal comprehensiveness and relevance in relation to the needs identified. It will assess the extent to which the proposal contributes to empowering civil society participation in the formulation and implementation of the European Green Deal. It will look specifically at the expected results, outputs, and deliverables, as well as their quantification. It will assess if relevant stakeholders have been involved in the design and will be involved in the actual implementation of the proposal. And I wish to highlight here that the number of thematic areas that will be covered does not have any correlation to the actual evaluation that will be done, evaluation result of this award criteria. So it's not, if you cover 10 different thematic areas, it will not give you more points than if you cover 1 or 2. It will really be the quality of the proposal that will be a determining factor here. Finally, the third criteria assesses the financial coherence and quality of the proposal, including its value for money, and has a total allocation of 25 points and a minimum threshold of 12 points. It assesses the proposed budget and its coherence with the actions and consistency with the eligibility rules for the financial for the budget, which will be presented to you by my financial colleagues at a later stage. This criteria also assesses the cost effectiveness and the cost efficiency of the approach proposed. It will look at whether the financial contribution of the beneficiary and or co-financers actually meet the rules established in the call for proposals. And the experts will also assess the budget for its accuracy and appropriateness in view of defining the lump sum per work package. Their assessment and recommendation will actually be used for possible adjustments to the proposed lump sums during contract preparation for proposals that will be recommended for funding. So the assessment of the financial coherence and quality of the proposal in the context of a call for proposal that will be using a lump sums approach will be very detailed and rather prescriptive in view of the preparation of future contracts. Now that we covered the main features of the call and the evaluation process itself, the next part of my presentation focuses more on the actual application form. I will myself be looking more at the technical application form, and my colleagues will take over for the more financial aspects. For those of you, sorry, for those of you who will have taken a look at the actual application form, you might have noticed that we've really tried to go for a simplified set of application forms, and also try to limit the volume of the application form itself. So the application forms actually is made up of two different technical forms, A and B, which are presented in a Word format, and financial forms F, which are presented in an Excel format. We obviously invite you to use these forms and to respect them when applying, as this is one of the elements that we will be looking at when assessing your proposal. You will note that there is a page and character limitation that is actually indicated at the top of each section of the application form. Please do respect it, as no additional information will be taken into consideration for the purpose of the evaluation. So any additional information beyond the maximum number of pages prescribed per section will not be taken into consideration. You will also notice that we've established a font size in order to avoid having to use magnifying lenses when assessing the proposals, to respect that minimum font size as well. There is some predefined text of declarations that need to be signed by the representatives of the organizations that are applying, and these texts cannot be modified. What you can do, however, to gain some space is to delete the instructions that are embedded into the application form. We invite you to really ensure coherence across all forms. They are interlinked. One is not separable from the other. So when writing them, please do ensure that there is actual coherence across all the different forms. There are not many of them, so it should ease the process. Note as well that our timeline does not give, well, our timeline foresees that the earliest possible starting date for any project would be August 2021. I underline that this is the earliest possible starting date. Actually, it might even be more like September 2021. But when preparing your proposal, do be aware of the fact that no project will be allowed to start before August 2021 at the earliest. So Form A is largely administrative. You are asked to indicate the name of your organization, so on and so forth. But there are a number of points that will require your particular attention. On Form A1, we ask you to indicate the contact person and their contact details. Please do ensure that not only are the contact details correct, but also that the person whose contact details have been provided will be available throughout the evaluation period. Why is that? As I indicated earlier on, we will not be kicking out proposals for purely administrative reasons. If we need to contact you, we need to be sure that the person whom we're contacting will be responsive. So on your side, please choose a person whom you know will be available throughout the evaluation process in case we need to contact them. It will also be the person we will inform of the evaluation results. And obviously you will want to hear about it. We also draw your attention to Form A2, which asks you to describe the competence and activities of your applicant, of your organization. Note that this information that you will be providing in Form A2 will actually be used along with the annual activity report to assess the geographical scope of the intervention of your organization, as well as its technical reliability. So the geographical scope of the intervention of your organization is something that relates to the eligibility criteria, and the technical reliability is something that comes at a later stage in case your proposal is actually recommended for funding. So the information that you provide there will be of utmost importance for us to use as information during the evaluation process. Finally, I mentioned again the forms that are included into the application pack. Form A3 is a coordinating beneficiary declaration, and Form A4 is a co-financer declaration, if relevant, if you do call upon co-financers. And these forms must be signed and returned with your application when you submit it. The next form of the technical application form is Form B1. B1 is a bit the backbone of your proposal. You're asked to provide a solid analysis of the problem that you're targeting, of the state of play, and the solution that you're proposing. You must here present the specific objective you want to achieve and how it will actually contribute to the goals objectives. Once again, quantifiable, qualifiable descriptions is what we're looking for. You will also be asked in B1 to provide a description of the stakeholders' engagement. And this is really, as I said, the backbone, the skeleton of your proposal. It needs to be structured, concise, and clear. It's challenging because there is a space limitation. So it is an intellectual exercise, I would say, to fit this information in a structured, concise, and clear manner within the space limited, the limited space that you're provided. But it's important that it's basically the thread that your proposal will follow. Yes, hello. Can you still hear me? I'm getting a call.
Yes, we hear you clearly.
Okay, then I will just ignore the call that I'm getting on our session. Good. Sorry about that. So forms B2 to B4. This is where you put the flesh on the bone. In B2, you are asked to precisely describe the work packages. And here again, we have limited the space and we limited the number of work packages that we're allowing for each proposal. So there is a maximum of 5 work packages. And for each work package, we are asking you to provide us a description of the expected results and the detailed activities that this work package will cover. We're also asking to give a description of the main deliverables and key milestones that will be achieved and delivered under this specific work package, as well as a detailed description of what are the expected risks, constraints, and the strategy to address them. So each work package must be presented in a logical sequence, and there needs to be a link to the project description that has been provided under B1. In the work package description, you also are asked to include a strategy, a description of the strategy that you will put in place to sustain your results, as well as to describe the manner in which your project will be managed and the monitoring and evaluation schemes that will be put in place to actually monitor and evaluate project impact. We will also be looking at a strategy for decreasing the CO2 footprint of the project, and for any green procurement strategy that your organization or policy that your organization might have in place. We do realize that it is challenging to limit the number of work packages to 5. But we are convinced that this will bring a simplification if compared to proposals that we receive under more traditional schemes that can sometimes be above 100 pages. Finally, Form B3 is a type of preamble to the financial form. In Form B3, you are asked to justify for the means required in relation to the main activities and expected results that have been described under the work packages. Each work package is to be presented in its own right. So in Form B3, you will be asked to justify the costs and the means of each work package that has been presented. And this, during the evaluation process, will allow us to understand in a more coherent and comprehensive way what has been presented in the financial forms. This is here where I once again underline the need for coherence. The experts that will be assessing the proposals will really be looking for total coherence between the activities expected results that have been described under each work package under B2, Form B2, with the actual descriptions of the means needed described under Form B3, and what will actually be presented in terms of figures under Forms F, the financial forms that will be presented by my financial critics. And they need to really understand each and every one of these information under these different parts of the application form, and each and every parts of these application form needs to be coherent with one another. Form B4 is probably less complicated in that it asks you for a description of the timeline of your project implementation. Here again, you need to go into a certain level of details, but there is a page limitation, so we invite you to really highlight the key elements, the key activities of your proposal in this timeline, which, as I said earlier, needs to cover a maximum period of 2 years. Where and when to submit your proposal? First and foremost, we strongly recommend submission in English. Again, this is to ease the evaluation process and to try to have the results of the evaluation process as quickly as possible in order to be able to contractualize as rapidly as possible as well. I reiterate the fact that you should only need to use the application, the forms that are contained in the application pack and nothing else. And the submission is to be done by email to the email address that is currently appearing in the on your screen, but that is also contained in the application pack. The submission has to be in the form of one single PDF document with technical and financial forms. It needs to be readable, printable in black and white, and in an A4 format. And in addition to that, the financial forms need to be submitted in an Excel format. We're asking for the supporting documents to be attached to the same email in the format that has been specified in the application guidelines. And the deadline for this call for proposal is Wednesday, 31st of March, 2021 at 5 p.m. Brussels times. This brings me to the end of my presentation. I wish luck to all those of you who will undertake to prepare a proposal and submit it, and pass the floor back to Anne.
Thank you, Joëlle. That was very clear and no doubt useful for all the participants. We've had a lot of questions coming in already. I believe you addressed some of them, but to all participants, don't hesitate to keep posting them or keep voting. So next, I would like to share the screen with Mariam Gandhi, who is Financial Officer at EASME, and she and her colleague Sylvie Kiekens will be explaining the administrative and financial aspects of this call for proposals. Mariam, the screen is yours.
Hello, dear participants. I hope you see the screen with the slides. My name is Okay, great. My name is Mariam Gandhi, and I will present today some financial aspects of this call, Life 2020 NGO for Green Deal, together with my colleague, Sylvie Kickens. We are both financial officers at IASME, and we work for the financial sector of Life program. It is a very good news that we use the simplified cost method for this call. This will reduce the administrative burden for both sides, for you beneficiaries, NGOs, and also for us at IASME. Of course, this will not mean that we will not perform financial control. Detailed financial check at proposal stage at evaluation. So we invite you to carefully prepare your budget. Also, please pay attention that the proper implementation of the project will be result-based. So we have prepared some slides for you that we will go through them. For establishing the project budgets, here you will see some general remarks. We invite you to read carefully the model grant agreements and guidelines for applicants that you find them with the application package. Be realistic when you estimate the cost. This will be a lump sum funding grant, and budgeted eligible costs will be evaluated and converted into lump sum at revision stage. There will be no cost reporting, and payments are dependent on your performance. For the financial application forms that you find them in Excel format, there will be several pages that we call them F forms from F0 to F5 that we will go through each of them. You will see that the grant takes the form of a single lump sum contributions to cover all eligible costs of the action. The grant will be based on the prefix lump sum, not on the reimbursement of actual cost. This will be an approximation of the beneficiary's actual cost that you will budget. There are two limitations to this. The overall lump sum contribution cannot exceed 300,000 euros, and it cannot be more than 60% of total estimated eligible cost. The estimated budget summary that you will find it on form F0, you will see it on the next slide, will consist of the budgeted eligible cost per cost category for each work package. This information will be automatically extracted from different forms that you will fill in. Okay, on the form F0, you are required that to provide per each work package on each form the total estimated eligible cost in the corrected cost category. Please also know that the personal cost should be calculated on the basis of a predefined unit cost that we will show you later on. And the indirect costs are calculated by applying a flat rate of 7% to the amount of total eligible direct cost. Please pay attention and round the cost to the nearest euro to avoid having decimals, and there will be no VAT to be included unless it cannot be recovered. You will see also on tick box on this. Here you see an overview of the form F0, the summary of the estimated budgets. As you see on the left side, you see that there is a column on each category of cost, and here you see each category and then total eligible expenditure. That you see that the yellow fields will be filled in automatically. And you will see that it's divided per work package, which will go to maximum 5 work package that was explained earlier by my colleague Joël. The lump sum share per work package will be shown in this line. There you will see that it will take the total eligible expenditure for each work package multiplied by the union contribution rates. Here you will see that the other information from contribution of the applicants and also other sources of the co-financing and revenue will be taken from different forms automatically. For the category of eligible costs that will be covered by this lump sum, you will find the direct personal cost, the travel and subsistence cost, and also external assistance, durable goods. Here you will see that we will have an exception, which will be explained by Sylvie, consumable cost and other direct costs, and indirect costs calculated on the basis of the standard flat rate of 7% of the total eligible direct cost, as I explained you. If you have questions, you can continue asking them on Slido, and we will cover it during the Q&A session. Now I will pass the floor to my colleague Sylvie, that she will explain you each category of costs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariam. Welcome to all from my side as well. As mentioned by Mariam, I will provide you some details on how to actually fill in these financial application forms. We'll start with the form F1. In here, you will be required to fill in the financial contributions. So first of all, your own contribution. As well, other sources of co-financing, obviously specifically for the project. Then other revenues, for instance, income from the project. In the next form, the form F2. Next slide, Mariam. Thank you. You will be required, so you will fill in the personnel costs. These are only costs related to employees, personnel with an equivalent appointing act, for instance, secondment, or contracts with natural persons, for example, consultancy, civil contracts, which are assigned to the project. You have to ensure that tasks are carried out by the appropriate staff level. And as already mentioned by Mariam, these costs are based on predefined unit costs per country. And they should be applied to all personnel necessary to carry out the action, regardless of the staff category. In the next slide, you will see what this form looks like. So first of all, you select the applicable country. In this case, it's Belgium. You fill in the staff role and you fill in the description linked with activities. The daily unit cost in the third column is filled in automatically based on the country you have selected. In the fourth column, you mention the number of days this person will work on the project. And in the last column, you will see the automatic calculation of the total costs. As you can also see, there is an option to employ volunteers on the project. So in the next slide, I will mention some more details regarding volunteers. These are persons working on a non-compulsory basis for an organization without payment. These are only accepted if they comply with the relevant national legislation. So in our example, this would be the Belgian legislation. They should be part of a structured approach within the project and their role should be clearly explained. And there should also be a reliable system in place to register the time they worked on the project. As you saw in the previous slide, the costs for these volunteers take the form of a unit cost per day. And I will also mention two limitations regarding volunteers. So the union contribution shall be limited to the estimated eligible costs other than those covering the volunteers' work. And the value of the volunteers' work is limited to 50% of the funding sources of the action. A next type of cost in the form F3 is travel and subsistence. In the next slide, I will show you what it looks like, but in this form, you should fill in you should indicate the corresponding type of destination. So this could be national inside EU or international outside EU. You should as well indicate clearly the purpose and the link with the activities. You should mention the average cost per person per travel, and these costs should be charged in accordance with the internal rules of the beneficiary. So whether you have a fixed subsistence rate or actual subsistence costs. Voila, so this is what the Form F3 looks like. You mention the type of destination, the description link with activities, the average cost per travel per person, and obviously also number of travels, which will give you in the last column the total costs, which will be automatically calculated. And this is also structured by work package, so you should split them by work package. Okay, next type of cost is equipment and depreciation in the Form F4. Again, you're required to provide a clear description of each item and provide the link with the activities. Please indicate the estimated purchase cost of the item and only if it is really necessary for the implementation of the project. These costs are eligible at 100% if the organization complies with all conditions set in the grant agreement. And you should certify the compliance by signing a certificate that has to be included with your project proposal. And please make sure to award contracts taking into account best value for money or lowest price, and there should not be any conflict of interest. Voilà, so this is the Form F4, where you should indicate item, description link with the activities, purchase cost, and since the depreciation is eligible at 100%, you should indicate number of months, indicating 1, then depreciation also indicating 1. Percentage of allocation to the action should then be 100%, and this will give you the automatically calculated total costs of the item. Okay, last type of cost and the last form financially. F5, this is where you should indicate first the type of cost, which can be a rental cost, external assistance, subcontracting, consumable, or other direct costs. Please, again, provide a clear description and the link with the activities. You should indicate the estimated purchase cost of the item. Again, only if really necessary for the implementation. And this cost should result directly from requirements imposed by the grant agreement. And again, when awarding contracts, please take into account the best value for money or lowest price, and make sure there is no conflict of interest. So in this form, there is in the first column the drop-down list with the type of cost. Again, the description link with the activities, then purchase cost, and percentage of allocation to the action, which you're required to fill in. And then in the last column, you will get the automatically calculated total costs. Okay, and then to finalize, a few highlights still to put your attention to them. First, financial viability. So financial viability of the applicant and its capacity to manage large EU grants will be assessed on the basis of the financial information you provided with this simplified financial statement, which was previously mentioned by my colleague Joël. The financial viability check will be used to assess whether financial guarantee will be required to either fully or partially cover the EU pre-financing payments. Then affiliated entities to the applicant are not eligible to receive funding under this call. And then a final reminder to always be clear and precise. Applications are only evaluated on what is submitted, so not on the potential of the idea. And please read properly call documents. They are very helpful, and start early in preparing your proposal. So voila, this is the end of our presentation. I hope it was interesting, and I pass the floor back to Anne Bolle.
Thank you very much, Sylvie and Mariam, for your presentations. That was very useful and a lot of detail. A lot of questions have come in. Keep them coming, and don't forget to vote so that we get the most, so we address the most relevant questions first. So we will now break for coffee and meet again at 11:55. And during the break, we will show you a video, which is a visual compilation of different live projects. Enjoy and see you back soon. Welcome back to our final session of this morning. I would like to ask the presenters to turn on their videos and microphone, and also welcome back Mr. Salsi, head of the Life Unit at IASME, as well as Anne Vermalen, who heads the admin and finance section at IASME. We have 50 minutes for questions, and I see almost 48 questions. You can still continue to vote and add some new ones. So let's get started. So we have a first question. What document do we have to provide for the criteria negative trend in revenues for 2020, since our financial report will be ready only in June 2021? Anne Vermalen, you want to take that one?
Yes, so in fact, you hear me, yeah?
Yes, we do.
So in fact, they can provide a draft documents from the balance sheet and the profit and loss that are already set up at that point. So at that moment, they will also have to include a self-declaration. And then later on, we can always, later in the process, at revision stage, request the approved versions, but at least the self-declaration then and the draft.
Okay, thank you, Anne. And I stay with you for the next question. The 40% own co-funding by the NGO, does it necessarily have to be in money, or can it be as services like in the other live calls? And we had other questions on asking if in-kind contribution can be included in that.
Yes, well, in any case, in-kind contribution is not eligible. So, and the 40% own, it should be co-funding or funding coming from third parties. So it's not necessarily only the part own funding, and it is always in terms of money. So it is not services, also not in the other live calls. But for example, if you finance yourself staff costs, this means that your organization has used money to pay these staff costs. So this is then the own contribution that you will include. So in principle, it is not services as such. So it is services if you receive them also from outside, and it's in-kind contribution. If you don't pay it with money that goes out from your accounts, then it's not considered co-funding. So it's only money that goes out from your accounts.
Okay, that's clear. And talking about co-financing, there's another question for you. If the co-financer could be a public institution, such as a university, city council, so on?
Yes. So in principle, it can be a private or a public entity. The only thing that cannot be used as co-financing is, like I said, in-kind contributions or funding coming from the EU budget. So, but it can be public, private, and it should be destined specifically for the project. So if it is a grant or a subvention that you get to finance whatever, then it is considered like own funding. If it is only destined for the project, then it is co-financing.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. A question for Angelo. Can projects begin in 2022, or must they begin in the second half of 2021? What is the final date of the projects? You're muted, Angelo. We can't hear you. can you unmute your microphone?
Because I have two microphones to unmute. Yeah. Yes, they can start in 2022. What we have set is the earliest starting date, but not the final starting date. Maybe Joël can confirm.
Yeah, that's correct. So we indicated the earliest starting date, which will obviously depend upon the grant contract agreement, the grant agreement signature. And the same goes for this question. The project can start in 2022, but the grant agreement needs to be signed before the end of 2021.
Okay. Thank you, Joël. The next one is also for you. If individual NGOs don't qualify for the minimum turnover, can a network of NGOs or a conglomerate also apply?
I'm not sure if the next one is for you, is for me, or is for Angelo, but I'll take it. A conglomerate of NGOs can apply if they have their own legal entity and if that conglomerate with its own legal entity meets the criteria.
Yep.
Okay, confirmed. Next one. What is behind the eligibility criteria related to staff numbers and revenue numbers? In smaller countries, this can be a substantial barrier for application submissions. Perhaps, Angelo, you can respond?
Well, we have devised these two elements, hopefully, because obviously we don't have the magic and perfect solution, in a way that it could cover the two situations, say the NGO that operates in a country where individual salaries are very high and therefore they have possibly a high turnover, but not necessarily a very big number of staff. And on the other side, the countries where staff salaries are much lower. And this we have addressed it in a way of having this binary approach. On the one side, the turnover, on the other side, the average staff numbers. We think that it should be probably hosting national active NGOs, clearly, but on both sides of the scenario. So I hope that we got it correct.
Okay. A next question by Sarah. Thanks for identifying yourself. Some of the annual activity reports will be in the national language. Will they need to be translated? And what is the required scope for the report? Joël?
So we're not asking for translation of the documents that you will be submitting. We would appreciate if they are in English, but that's not a requirement. As regard to the scope of the report, we are assuming that you would have an annual activity report prepared for your organization, and we will accept the scope that it has in normal circumstances. This said, it will need to describe what are the type of activities that your organization has implemented over the course of the previous year.
Okay. I see the next question is the same about English, so we just addressed that. I skip to the next one. Anne Vermalen, volunteer costs, does that count as co-financing?
Well, in principle, in order to calculate whether the volunteer costs can be that are charged to the project are taken into account full or only partly, because there are some limitations, the volunteer costs are for that taken into account. So maybe I can quickly, because it's not so easy to understand, it's also a new feature. Maybe I can quickly highlight it, that in principle, 50% of the total cost of volunteers and the other costs that are eligible, their 50% maximum can come from volunteers, and it cannot be more than 100% of the other eligible costs, so outside the volunteer costs. So, but then in that sense, it is a type of co-financing, but of course, the real co-financing will be money that goes out of the organization, at least from the own funding. But for our co-financing, the volunteer cost is taken into account.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Joël, the next question is similar to a previous one. Can it also be an umbrella NGO consisting of several smaller ones, but with a link to that individually don't qualify for the minimum turnover?
Well, the same answer would be given if this umbrella NGO has its own legal entity and meets the criteria, then it would be eligible in its own right, regardless of whether its members, the smaller NGOs, meet the criteria. It is that one applicant organization that has to have its own legal entity and that has to meet the eligibility criteria.
Okay, that's clear. Angelo, we have a question from a German NGO that works on energy efficiency and climate protection, both at the local and regional level in EU member states. They wonder if they are eligible for this call if they also work outside Germany.
Yes, of course they are. Still the target of the call refers to actions that will take place within the EU member states. So if they are active, say, in Germany and Austria, that's an okay situation, no problem.
Mm-hmm. I think that also covers the next question, that asking if an NGO is limited, has to be limited to national or regional scope, or it can also be acting in more countries. So you confirm they can be active in more member states, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Anne Vermalen again, please clarify if you consider 10% or 100,000 euro loss in revenue or income for the eligibility criteria, I believe.
Yes, I think that the call specifies revenue.
Revenue, okay. Next question, will a university lab that examines how wholesalers and retailers can improve civil awareness of sustainability, healthy food and local supply be eligible? Angelo?
No, I don't think so, because the university lab would not be considered as a non-profit organization under this particular call. Is that correct, Joelle?
Yeah, and further to that, I would say that the purpose of the existence of the lab would have to be specifically working on climate and environmental aspects. Yeah. So without presuming of the content of the statutes of this university lab, we would assume that no, it would not be eligible.
Yep.
Okay, another one on definition of NGO. To be eligible, we need to be independent, in particular from government, but our NGO is partially financially supported by the French Ministry of Environment. Is that a problem?
Sorry.
No, it is not. As long as the French Ministry of Environment does not control the NGO. I mean, if they are the one that if the NGO is free to decide, I mean, it's just like receiving money from us. I mean, as long as we don't control you, you are independent.
Correct. Thank you, Angelo. Joelle, the next question is from an NGO that works both on environmental and social issues, and they have increased its income overall, but the income related to environmental issues has decreased. Can they be an applicant under this call?
So we will be looking at revenues as highlighted in the previous question, and the revenue will be looking at the revenue of the organization and not at the revenue of a specific field of intervention of the organization. So you would have to verify that in order to determine whether or not you're meeting the specific eligibility criteria.
Okay, thank you. Anne Vermalen, next question. Is it possible to insert a sub-granting scheme in the proposal?
Well, I think that financial support to third parties is eligible. It will be maximum for 100,000 euro over the entire project and maximum of 20,000 euro per instance. So it is possible.
And there, if I may intervene, this also could partly reply to one of the questions that has been raised already several times, meaning what about the small local NGOs? And indeed, this could be a mechanism, not necessarily the global solution, but it could be a mechanism where a bigger NGO acts as a supporter to a smaller NGO, obviously provided the smaller NGO activities, they fit into the logic of the proposal of the bigger NGO. So you can in turn become, if you want, show solidarity to the more local and smaller ones using this particular mechanism that we call the cascading grants.
I think maybe just to add that in order to do this, please observe the rules for using this possibility, because there are quite some things that you will need to respect, so to avoid surprises afterwards.
Okay. Thank you, Angelo, for raising this opportunity also for smaller NGOs, but keep in mind, do check requirements first. Joël, is there a pre-financing amount?
So there will be a minimum pre-financing of 70% of the contribution of the EU, leaving 30% as a final payment.
Okay. Do the 10 members of staff required to be eligible have to be full-time staff? Again, Joël?
So we don't ask them to be full-time staff, but we ask them to be permanent staff. If that answers the question sufficiently. They don't have to be full-time equivalent, but they have to be permanent staff of the organization.
Okay, I think that's clear. Anne Vermalen, regarding co-funding again, does this need to be only money for staff salaries? Can it be for indirect money from a TV station or local market rent?
So as already mentioned before, it should be real money going out of your accounts, of your bank account. So it is either to pay staff costs or other costs related to the project, but it will be real money. It is not, or it can, of course, the money can also come from co-financers, but then it's still real money that will go out from your bank account.
Okay. Next one for Angelo. Is there a limit on LIFE or Green Deal projects managed by an NGO to receive additional funds through this call?
I suspect the one that asked this question refers to the overlap of possible other action grants under LIFE. So a traditional project, for example, no, we have not set any limit. The only limit we have set is the ineligibility, the cross ineligibility between operating grants under LIFE and this particular call.
Okay. I stay with you, Angelo. Could we propose cross-cutting capacity building project covering the whole scope of the Green Deal in several EU countries? Quite an ambitious one.
Well, since it's ambitious, it's even more welcome. Of course, yes.
They can. Okay, great. Next question. If we know that projects will not be renewed in 2021 because of COVID, and therefore we expect cash flow issues by the end of the year, can we apply? Joël?
Well, your organization has to meet the eligibility criteria at the time of applying. So if at the time of applying you do not meet the criteria related to revenue loss, then you will not be considered eligible, even if you expect to meet such issues at a later stage.
Okay. Joël, I stay with you. Another question from Sarah. Are we eligible if we are a regional subdivision of a nationwide NGO, but legally independent?
It depends in which country you're established, because if you're active only at regional level, then you would have to be established in one of what we consider to be larger countries. So if you are in a smaller country and you're only active at regional level, then you would not be considered eligible.
Okay, maybe I jump one question because I see it's fairly similar. So this is the particular case of Belgium. So I understand that the regional based organization in Belgium, so active in Flanders, cannot apply, or can we apply with a Walloon based partner?
So partnerships are not eligible under this call for proposal. An organization has to apply in its own right and alone. If your organization is based in Flanders, but its scope is national, then it would meet that specific criteria. But if it's based in Flanders and only active in Flanders, then indeed this criteria would not be met. And you would not be allowed to apply in a partnership.
Okay. Anne Vermalen, could you repeat the guidance on VAT?
Okay, so VAT can be included in the eligible costs only if it cannot be recovered.
Okay, that's clear. And another one for you. I don't understand the reference to volunteer cost. Are you saying that a volunteer can attract the equivalent of employee cost? It is the same flat rate.
No, it's not the same flat rate. For volunteers, there are other flat rates which have been defined in the call. And it is a volunteer is not receiving a salary. So if they are embedded in the project, then the days that they would work can be declared, and the related cost, which can be calculated based on the unit costs that are mentioned in the call. So the total cost of the volunteer can be used, can be calculated by multiplying the number of days with this unit cost, but it's not the same as the one for employees.
Okay, that's clear. We seem to have quite a lot of confusion on definition of NGOs. What exactly do you mean by national NGO? Joël, you want to take that one?
I'll take it, and I'm sure Angela will complete it. So by national NGO, we mean an NGO which has the capacity to act at national level in the implementation of its actions. And obviously, this can go beyond national level. As we've highlighted earlier on, we will consider positively proposals that aim at covering a geographical scope that goes beyond their own national boundaries. But this is not a requirement, and obviously the proposal will not be judged solely on that ambition of a larger geographical scope. But by national NGO, we mean an organization that has the capacity to demonstrate its ability to implement action, at least at a national level. And this national is brought down to regional in cases of countries that are identified as larger countries in this call for proposal. But maybe, Angela, you want to add something? You're muted.
Sorry, I've seen some cross questions about this issue, which boils down to also how do we prove it that we are active at national/regional level. The systems are quite straightforward. You could be, say, let's take an example. In Austria, you are an NGO based legally in Austria, and you are open. Your office is open in Innsbruck. You might be active only in Innsbruck and Tyrol, and then you're not eligible anymore. You might be active means that you have caretaking activities in the past that you can show in your portfolio of actions that only refer to that particular land in that country. You might be the same NGO, but this time you have members all across Austria. So your membership network covers the whole spectrum of Austria. And in that case, we would consider you as national. You might be the same one and you have members anywhere, but your action that you can report show that you've been active just as well as in Tyrol, also in Niederösterreich, in Vienna, and so on and so on. And in that case, we would consider you as national. That's it's a very pragmatic approach. There is no legal definition as such that you can look for in Wikipedia or that could help us. So we will use these kind of elements to indeed establish whether you are eligible or not for that condition.
Okay, thank you, Angelo. Joël, there's a question on how to interpret one of the criteria. So why referring to revenue and not surplus versus loss? For example, what if in 2019 our revenue increased, but expenses also increased, resulting in a loss? A creative way of interpreting.
Hold on one second. What if into revenue and not surplus? What if in 2019 we increased revenues, but expenses increased even more? Anne, can I ask you to help me on that one, because I'm getting lost in the wording.
I think the only thing is we have to comply with the description of the eligibility criteria in the call, and we only talk about revenue. So
no, but I can possibly try to clarify why in the word we have taken revenues. The inputs that we got from the ground across Europe, whether the umbrella organization in Brussels that we were in contact with, or other organizations at more national or local level, showed that on the one side, activities went down across the board. So most of the entities, whether private commercial or private non-commercial, had suffered because of reduction of activity. Some had to stop, as you remember well. And at the same time, the non-profit organization, they also started having serious problem of cash flow. So the income, the revenues, sorry, not the income, the revenues that they were getting, because of the fact that they were not able to implement certain actions, or because of the fact that they were not able to raise funds as they were able before, they started seeing less money coming in. A lot of those reverted to schemes like national support schemes to pay the salaries of their staff that was possibly put on a chômage technique for a certain period of time. Others used other systems, but we took revenues as the sort of key indicators of the fatigue, the problem that was induced by COVID in this particular moment. We could have taken others, but it could have been, I don't know whether this will indeed mirror correctly the situation or the impact of the COVID crisis on every single organization, probably not. But we're pretty confident that it will probably be a rather simple and straightforward indicators that tells us indeed if we are stepping in with an NGO that is really having difficulties, and that our cash that will come in will make them a little bit more viable, and they will have a floater that will lead them possibly, hopefully, out of the danger zone. We didn't want also, we feared a lot that NGO could start dismiss staff simply because they didn't have the money to pay them. And that's a big blow for an NGO, because it means not only that you're losing a person, but you're losing also the skills of that person. And before rebuilding it, you know better than me that it's not so easy. So that's a bit the logic behind it.
Thank you, Angelo. That's a useful clarification. Anne Vermalen, a question: what if we are based in one country but paying individuals in another country to carry out activities? I'm guessing they're asking if it's eligible or if it's possible.
But I think that there are two parts to the question. Normally for the staff costs, they need to be in the accounts, of course, of the organization. So, and it should be either employees, or if they are not employees, they should meet the criteria to be considered the same, like natural persons that have a specific contract with the organization. So first of all, these items need to be in place. Then when it concerns the activities, of course, this is more the operational question, if the activities are needed for the accomplishment of the objective of the project. So the two should match. So in principle, if the individuals are outside and they are needed to come to carry out these activities, and they are on the payroll of the organization, then and they meet all the criteria to be considered staff, then in principle they could be eligible.
Thank you, Anne. Joël, next question was already raised, but might be good to repeat. So when is payment made in the project cycle? At the outset as pre-financing, at the end with reporting? A statement was made that payments are dependent on performance. Can you clarify a bit more?
So the projects that the grant agreements that will be concluded under this call for proposal will establish a minimum pre-financing of 70% of the total EU contribution, retaining a maximum of 30% for the final payment, and there will be no intermediate payment made. And indeed, as was explained, we are innovating under the LIFE program the use of the lump sum approach, meaning that there will be no verification of costs at final payment stage, but that the final payment and the confirmation of the pre-financing will be based on the delivering of the results of the action. I hope that clarifies.
I think it does. Thank you, Joël. The next question, Anne, I think we've already addressed. So how to provide income loss figures in time. Final accounts might be available in March 2020 only. So you mentioned that a draft account could be provided, right?
With the self-declaration, and then if it's end of March that these figures are available, they can always, if they are selected, they can always then during the revision provide us the actual confirmed statements.
Okay.
So we will accept it based on a self-declaration.
Okay, thank you. Does the management work package and the dissemination work package enter in the maximum of 5 work packages, Joël?
Yes, they do. They do not need to necessarily be one dedicated work package, but you should integrate them into the 5 work packages. So it can be part of one of the work packages, or it can be spread across the different work packages. I mean, it's up to you to define what is the best way and the most, the best way to actually define it. But it's not a separate, it's not an additional work package.
Okay. Anne Vermalen again. So full cost recovery, overheads, organizational costs is partly met by the flat rate of 7% of the direct costs of the project?
Yes, so at the end, if you go to the budget sheet that has to be filled, you will see that all the costs that are declared per work package are added. And then on top of these costs, we will apply the 7%. And include it as indirect cost in the total budget.
Okay. We have a lot of questions on eligibility criteria, and I can hear the disappointment if not all 9 criteria are met. So there's one more here. If one criteria is not met, for example, the number of staff is 9 in 2019, then there is no reason for submitting the application?
No, you still have an option. You could have a revenue equal to at least 700,000. So if you read the criteria number 7, it says a revenue equal to at least 700,000 in 2019 and or an average number. That's what I meant before. So if you are a, let's say, low cash flow or low revenue NGO, but with a lot of staff because the salaries of these individuals are rather low, then you are still, you might still be okay. So if you have 9 people, but you have 710,000 revenues, you're okay. You can apply.
Good news.
If you don't meet both of them, then you don't.
Okay, thank you, Angelo. The next one is also for you. Is a national grassroots movement between citizens and farmers in favor of sustainable and agroecological food system possible in this call?
Are we talking of an action that promotes a grassroots movement which is led obviously by an NGO that is eligible? Then of course, yes. If we're talking about an entity, so if this movement is the one that we refer to as the one that would apply, then this movement has to have its own legal entity and it has to be fulfilling the criteria that Joël so well explained.
Okay. We have some repeating questions. So the next one, can an NGO apply for this call if it's currently beneficiary of a LIFE project or is applying for a Green Deal one? So we already said yes for LIFE action grants or other Green Deal funding, but not for LIFE operating grants. Another one on eligibility criteria, number 8, will be applicable if or organization doesn't show the minimum negative trend, I assume in revenue in 2020, but can demonstrate financial deficit in the next 3 years. Joël?
So again, the criteria is rather clear. It's looking at the average of the 2 previous years, and it's not looking at the next 3 years. So demonstrating a future deficit will not allow you to meet the criteria itself.
Okay, I think the next question we have in the presentation that's recorded the list of documents that are needed. So I'll skip that one. Next one, are projects carried out from European Union but targeting countries eligible to EU neighboring policy eligible? Angelo?
No, they're not. Sorry.
Okay, crystal clear.
Short reply.
Joël, are the work packages the same as actions in other LIFE proposals, other LIFE action grants?
I think I wouldn't try to make any comparison. We're working here with work packages, and a work package contains a number of activities that need to be detailed, as well as other types of information that are spelled out in the application form and in the guidelines for this call. So I would not go on hazardous grounds and try to make any comparison with other types of forms of proposals.
Okay.
I think the work package contains descriptions of activities similar to the ones that you would find in the actions of the other LIFE proposals, but that's as far as it goes in terms of comparison.
Yeah,
and the level of details that we're asking is also comparable, I would say.
Another reason not to compare it is that there is this direct link with the lump sum. So there is a lump sum established for each work package. So if your work package 1 is you are dealing with education, and your work package 1 is building the school, there is a sum connected to building the school. Then you have another work package which would be running the school for 2 years, and then you have salaries and all these kind of things. So, and since there is this association which is substantially different in terms of approach with the classical LIFE projects, you have to carefully establish what your work package are, because then you have to give a reasonable estimate, and we will discuss and negotiate on this estimate, because you will tell us to build the school, it will cost me 1 million euro. We will come back, say, well, wait a minute, we have evidence that shows that in your country that kind of school is not more than 500,000. How come you say it's 1 million? Once we agree, then you deliver the school and we pay you what we have established for that work package, punto. So that's a bit the new logic and the new narrative that you have to build, but for the rest, it's not so different.
Okay. Next one also for you, Angelo. Would you consider preparation?
Can I just add, sorry, Anne, just one slight comment in addition to what Angelo just said?
Go ahead.
Infrastructure costs are not eligible under this goal, so in fact, you would not even be allowed to build this goal.
I took the wrong example, sorry.
Thank you, Joël.
Thanks, Joël.
Angelo, a question. Would you consider preparation of a study for the expansion of the total area of protected areas to meet the 30% goal as a possible aim for the project?
Why not? Yeah, the only thing is that you will have to compete with others, and showing that indeed your contribution, your real contribution, and the sustainability also of your contribution to that particular target that you want to set in terms of Green Deal is indeed better than the others. So a study in itself, you know, sometimes it simply lands on a nice shelf, and then what do we do with it? So I think you probably have to go a yard beyond simply the study and think about the use of the study, and possibly, or at least already the start of the implementation of the content of the study by, for example, identifying areas and already protecting them. I mean, the logic remains pretty much the one of the LIFE program. We want to see some sort of impact. So the pure soft approach that ends only in a nice additional knowledge might not fly. So be careful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Joël, next question is for you. Like many NGOs, ours is split into a foundation and an association. Only the foundation qualifies for funding. Is it still worth applying? I'm not fully clear on this one myself.
Me neither. If the foundation part of your NGO actually qualifies and meets the criteria, and you're in need of additional funding, I would say that yes, it's worth for you to apply. We will not look at the association side when establishing the eligibility of the foundation, provided that the foundation has its own legal entity.
Okay.
And it's established as an NGO.
And it's non-profit, and its main purpose and field of action is environment and climate change, and.
Okay. Anne Vermalen, we have a question to clarify if the 300,000 euro is the maximum grant awarded or the maximum full budget of the project?
It's the maximum union contribution for the project.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've already covered it. No, maybe not fully. Joël, a question for you. We registered in the UK in 2014 as an LTD company, then to be Brexit-proof in Belgium as an ASBL in November 2018. Do we meet the eligibility criteria? I assume related to the date of the creation.
We would only, well, if you were an LTD company in 2014 in the UK, you were probably not non-for-profit. And as an ASBL in Belgium, you would meet the non-for-profit element, but the date would not suffice. So it's very difficult to give you a yes or no answer on the basis of the information that you have provided. But we will look at the date of establishment of the organization that meets all the criteria. So if your 2014 UK organization didn't meet all the criteria, we will dismiss it. It's not if your 2018 established organization meets the other criteria that we would not take it into consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Reference has been made on specific guidelines on sub-grant scheme. Where can I find the guidance? At the end of our information session today, you will get the link on the application package. So stay tuned for that. A next question for
it's
criteria.
page 14.
Okay, thank you, Anne. That's very helpful. And then in criteria 7, yeah, Joël, you mentioned earlier permanent staff. So I think it's still not fully clear. Maybe you can elaborate a bit more. I think the difference between permanent staff and full-time equivalent.
Oh, permanent, it's a staff that is on the payroll of the organization.
And has a contract with the organization.
And has a contract with the organization. Yeah.
So if the contract establishes that this person works only 50% of her time or his time for the organization, is still permanent, even though it's part-time in terms of, because the former question was about the quantity of time, the full time or not. So you have to distinguish between having a contract with a person that obliges you to pay a salary on a regular basis to this person for a period of time, and and establishing how much time this person works for you.
If you have an organization that has one staff member but employs 9 consultants, those consultants would not be on the payroll of the organizations, that they would not contribute towards meeting the 10 staff members 10 permanent staff member requirement.
Yeah, I think that's clear now. And then a final question. Oh, second before last question on the Brexit for Angelo. Do we assume the same criteria as before Brexit? Assume this funding would be subject to state aid?
Gee. Do you have a reserve question?
I can go to the next one.
I mean, they have filled in, I think, 5,000 pages in the agreement for Brexit. With I think of myself quite a lot, but in this case, I must admit my non-preparation. I'm not up to reply to the question.
Okay. And then a last question, would it be eligible an action aiming to approve a national well-being budget? Can it be considered as contributing to the priority of sustainable finance? Angelo?
Would it be eligible an action aiming at approve a national well-being budget?
I think
I'm a bit lost. I don't want to make any jokes about well-being because probably the person meant something different than what I understand.
Okay.
Can it be considered as contributing to the priority of sustainable finance? Now, I think I would need a bit more to.
Yeah, I think 160 character limits doesn't always allow to explain the question well. So, but don't worry, if your question wasn't answered, you can always post it to the email for this particular call. Also, apologies if I accidentally skipped one of our questions. And I got a note here from our IT team who apologized for any noise issues that you might have heard during the coffee break alongside our music. So that's that. So I would like to hand over again to Mr. Salsi for some concluding remarks of today's information session.
I think that, first of all, I want to thank all those that have invested, spared their time to participate in this event. I think overall the level of participation and also the wealth of questions that we have received showed that indeed we might have touched a soft spot. I do reckon, like many questions already underlined, that we are far away from having indeed covered either the whole spectrum of needs, whether this is a type of NGO covered or when these particular NGOs will suffer more from the blow of the COVID crisis. And apologies for this. I try to explain you at my best in very practical terms why this is like that. On the other side, allow me to be for a moment proud of our Little Life program in a matter of months, which for a public institution like we are, and a rather large one, we managed to put together something that was extraordinary and totally unforeseen. And I hope that you may consider this in positive terms as a one additional contribution to our joint effort to fight against this particular situation we are living into. And unless I'm wrong, I hope to be proven wrong, obviously, life for the moment or the environment and climate sector are the only sector where something like this is being tested and launched from Brussels. So not enough. Not perfect, could be better, and whatever you want. And I'm certain that we leave a lot of unhappy people behind, people that would have hoped for some space for them, but they couldn't find it. But at the same time, I think a unique type of effort that maybe will be used as an example later on, either by other sectors or other programs, or by ourselves if the need pops up or is even worse in the time to come. For the rest, I really I hope that you have enjoyed and that you have that our explanations were clear enough for everyone, and the call now is in your hands, and I sincerely hope that we will get a lot of good application, and that we will possibly even have the problem of having to distinguish between a good and a better one in this competition, without leaving too many unhappy or unsatisfied people behind. And now I think I have to give the floor back to Anne.
Thank you, Angelo. So this concludes our information session of this morning. Thank you so much to all participants for joining us, for actively engaging through Slido, and also our presenters, of course. I hope you have all the information you need to submit good proposals by the 31st of March. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and if you use Slido, you will see a small poll pop up. It's only 5 minutes. We would really appreciate your feedback on how relevant this session was for you. And finally, I wish you all the best with the application process, because a powerful NGO contribution will be indispensable to reach the transformative change the EU Green Deal envisions. Thank you, everyone. Good luck and bye-bye.